We use it almost every day, and it determines a lot about our life. But what exactly is money, and where does it come from? And what can it do other than get us things like food and tools, but also things that are less important, like electronics. Where did this money come from? Today in this video we will hear from a college student and where he thinks money comes from, and someone that works at a credit union and where he thinks money comes from. And we're going to see if we can begin to figure out why this money is so important and why we let these little coins and pieces of paper hold so much influence over our lives.
My name is Emmanuel Obi, and my title is Relationship Manager, George Mason University, Apple Federal Credit Union branch. And so before we get started, we've already had a little conversation. My answers are not they're not in concert with any Apple policies or procedures. These are going to be just answers that I, through my experience, can share with you. Money. All right. Well, my understanding of money, when you talk of either paper money, you talk of coin. There are two. To me, there are two parts to the question. The first is, how did money originate? Is what I'm thinking the question is really asking. I'm hoping the question is asking. Otherwise, if the question is just asking, how do banks get money? Well, banks get money through the Federal Reserve. They are the ones who have the sole power and right to print money, whether it's the paper money or whether it's coin. And then banks and credit unions have accounts with the Federal Reserve. And so whenever banks need money or credit unions need money, they just make a request to the Federal Reserve for what they want. And the Federal Reserve provides that money to the banks, as long as the bank obviously has money in their account with the Federal Reserve. But if the question you were asking is more around how money came about or how it originated, what I know for sure is that before there was money, there was what was called trade by barter. What is trade by barter? That's simply a case where you have something that I want and I have something that you want. We deem those things to be of relative similar in value and we exchange. Okay, so now I have what I want and you have what you want. But eventually, when societies got a little bit more complicated, got a little bit more sophisticated, there was a need to have a form of exchange for either services or products that could be more easily interacted. So instead of saying, okay, because if I need something, but you don't have it, and you're the only person that I know, then what? Then I'm kind of stuck. So the avenue for money, I don't know exactly when money was introduced to the world, but I know that you're talking a long time ago into ancient times. I think money, first of all, started through the regular, pieces of gold or copper, or sometimes even in the past. In Africa, for example, I know the cowrie shells were used for exchange. But again, that just goes back to value. Value people placed in some of those items determined whether or not they could use it as a means of exchange. So if you came to me and I had maybe, I don't know, a pot of soup, and that's what you wanted, and you had some cowrie shells, I would say, okay, well, this pot of soup is equivalent to three cowrie shells, and you would give me those cowrie shells. Now I'm in possession of three cowrie shells, which I can then use to also purchase or get something from somebody else that they might have. So that's kind of the advent. That's really where money came from, and of course, as the societies got more sophisticated, then we obviously went into creation of banks and Federal Reserve and central banks of the world, and basically these are the ones that control, the creation of currency as we know it today. You know, and that's to me that's the it's probably the simplest way I could try to define that.
Well, I know the United States, like it's issued from the Federal Reserve, but I think from a historical context, it was used as like an analog for, instead of bartering actual goods, you were bartering something which then could be bartered for other goods. And maybe it could be seen as, an analog for this is the like worth the amount of time that it took me to, you know, make this or trade this, and so it's worth this amount of money because everyone kind of decided that that's how it's going to be done.
Has now been answered by a college student and someone that works at a bank. And basically, they both told us that money came out of the need to replace a bartering system, where somebody would have, say, some fruit, and someone else would have a tool to cut the fruit with, and they'd be like, well, hey, I have an extra clementine, and and the other person would say, I have an extra knife, you can cut your extra knife, and I'll take the extra clementine because I'm hungry. That's a very simplified example, but they agreed the money came through some sort of bartering system. Exactly the same as the textbook definition that we learned of the sacrifice from the animals. Maybe the argument can be made that a certain amount of sacrifice goes into giving this fruit up or the sacrifice of the labor used to make this tool, because these tools don't make themselves. So maybe what we learned is there's always some sort of exchange. This comes at the price of something, whether that something is labor or maybe just time spent. Maybe one of the big things to take away, this money is, in a sense, time, a representation of time, at least in certain economies. Time is money, and money, we learned that this very tangible form of money instead comes from something more abstract, like time. It is quite possible.